Big banks are laying out a roadmap for everybody right now who is struggling with runaway wage inflation, with wages getting too expensive to handle right now, and that is simply hire less people. Both Bank of America and Wells Fargo have been cutting the number of employees, reducing their headcount, as banks like Goldman Sachs say that their compensation costs have jumped 33%, which brings the average of their employee from $329,000 in 2020 up to $404,000 in 2021. Now, this is a real shocker, right? To anybody who has studied economics, classic economics 101 says the more you pay employees, the more employees you can hire, right? The higher wages get, the more people will have a job. Well, that sounds facetious because it is, but increasingly in modern economics, there are proponents of that very theory that the more you pay people and the higher wages are in a society, the more that stimulates demand for the goods and services that circulate back around to producing those very jobs. But in a real world example where we've had some of the largest wage inflation in the United States that we've had in decades, we are now seeing employers have to cut the number of employees because, shocker, if something costs you more, you're going to buy less of it. And when labor costs more, you're gonna buy less of it. Now, I'm not by any means saying that it's a bad thing people are getting paid more and it's a bad thing that wages are going up pretty much across the board. That's a very good thing. I think the more people that make more money, the better this world will be. But what I am saying is the source matters. And when the source is an unprecedented expansion of the money supply working its way throughout the economy, stimulating a massive bump in demand that then circulates over into churning employees and employees going from job to job to job, getting higher and higher wages, again, as a result of that massive monetary expansion, eventually you get to the point where you squeeze employers and they just decide we are going to do more with less. If we're going to start hiring people at higher and higher and higher wages, we're going to make them do more work and be more productive and compensate for the lack of headcount that we have as a result of these wages going up. And this is very similar to the minimum wage argument where people talk about the benefits of raising the minimum wage because it's very difficult to see the downside, the cons, because most of those are the unseen results, whereas most of the seen results of a minimum wage hike are seen. This is something that Dr. Robert Murphy talks about. He's an Austrian economist, and he says that regardless of whether you're a modern or Keynesian economist or whether your political leaning is left or right, pretty much everybody agrees that if you want to disincentivize something, you make it more expensive. So for a company, for corporations, if you want to disincentivize their carbon output, make a carbon tax and make outputting carbon more expensive, and that will incentivize companies to do less of it. When you make something more expensive, you're going to persuade the individual to find another way to do it. But shockingly, this logic is completely ignored when looking at wages, and people just assume for some reason that if we make wages artificially higher and higher and higher, somehow that will result in more behavior of the exact same thing. No, if wages or labor, employees get more expensive, the logical thing that would happen as a result of that is less employees, less labor, less people getting paid wages. And it's very easy to look at the data and say, look at all these people who have had wage increases and say that is a good thing, right? But what's harder to see is all the people who didn't get another job as a result of being crowded out of the workplace because everybody costs more now. And so unfortunately, this is a battle of the seen and the unseen, where we have a select group of people who are experiencing real benefits of the artificially higher wages that came about as a result of the monetary expansion, and that will probably feed on itself, and you won't necessarily be able to see the data of the downsides of this dynamic because people are leaving the workforce and it's making it more difficult for them to get back in, especially at the lower end, especially for people who would be willing to work for less than the minimum wage, and it is illegal for them to do so. It is illegal for somebody to offer their labor for $5 an hour, even if they want to do so. And one more objection that I'd like to address about this dynamic is that people look at the power dynamics between the employers and the employees, and they look at the monopolistic tendencies of large corporations and say, hey, well, if we didn't have these minimum wage laws, then pretty much everybody would get taken advantage of and people would get paid the smallest amount possible. But if that was true, everybody would be getting paid the minimum wage right now. Because if that power dynamic was really there and that pricing power was there, everybody would be getting paid the minimum wage. Then you might have a stronger argument that raise the minimum wage then, because there's too much power there on the side of the employers. But in fact, most people make far more than the minimum wage. And so the reason for that is not because of the minimum wage. The reason for that is because of competition and difference in skills. So I would anticipate this dynamic to continue, especially into the near future, as more and more people get priced out of the labor market, and the lucky few who are able to remain in, get higher and higher wages. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.